There are so many different platforms now.
We are being told that this tsunami is very real. It is coming our way. We are on the last truck to leave.
Off the Canadian coast, but racing towards the border with France.
Smugglers, well, they could choose from more than 100 kilometres of beaches and coves.
Over the past 4 weeks, there have been some confrontations between the police and protesters.
Anyone that has any sort of grievances against the government of Evo Morales has sort of seen this march as their way to voice their concerns.
There you go. A reel that I noticed not only included the standard of the trade, which is the pan and then the forward walk shot, but for the first time I saw a backwards walk shot of somebody doing a stand-up. So that's the in-the-moment type reporting that Al Jazeera is become well-renowned for. And Amjad Atallah is the chief of the Americas, which means he is in charge of all the content coming out of North, South, and Central America, as well as the Caribbean. And he came to journalism with a really rich background, and I find this really interesting myself, in conflict and post-conflict situations and analysis. And it's my belief as a journalist that every broadcast organization should have somebody in a key role with that kind of knowledge, given that that is really what is at the root of so much news we cover. So I'd like to introduce Amjad Atallah. Now we're going to do this, think of it in terms of a Twitter analogy. You'll watch us do an interview here, just like a conversation online. You'll lurk for a little bit, but then I'll open it up to the audience and have you guys take microphones and ask questions as well. So if there's anything I've missed and we haven't discussed, you've got ample opportunity to do that in a few moments. So I wanted to start off with you by asking you, for you personally and professionally, I suppose, what was a moment that you thought was a game changer where you said, this mobile digital world is really going to change the news business?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here, and despite, it's just drizzle, so I mean, it's no problem. It's beautiful weather.
It's a sunny, rainy day.
I understand it's supposed to snow in New York on Saturday, so no, the weather here is beautiful. I think for me, it was a dawning realization. It wasn't an epiphany moment where I recognized how things were changing. But I think, coincidentally, it was February 2004 that somebody articulated it for me, and it was sort of like an aha for me, where it was like, really, this is actually, the way the world is now and the way technology has progressed is actually going to have an impact on political events in ways that we haven't imagined before. And February 2004, I think, happens to be when Facebook started. But I had no idea about Facebook then. I was in Baghdad. I was interviewing a number of Iraqi government officials from the Iraqi Governing Council at the time. And I was speaking to one of them, and he was explaining to me that his party supported the U.S. removing Saddam Hussein and was glad that the U.S. was there, but expected the United States to leave. And he said, you know, if we know that the United States supported Saddam Hussein for the last 10 years before, and from the 1980s at least, we know that the U.S. supported the Baathists when they were crushing the communists. But the U.S. had made Saddam so strong, we couldn't do it, he said. We, the people, had tried repeatedly to overthrow him, and we were repeatedly crushed. And so it only made sense that the United States, which had made him so strong, would be the power that would remove him. And now the United States, having done this, should, we thank them and they should leave. And I said, well, there seems to be no talk. This was 2004, this is before Fallujah, before everything. I said, there's no talk of the U.S. leaving. And he said, no, they'll have to leave. They won't be able to stay if they try to impose another dictatorship on us, or if they attempt to keep bases here, there'll be trouble. And I said, well, the British were here, and they were here for a long time, and there was trouble, but the trouble lasted a long time? Are you looking for a long period of trouble? And he said, no, things move much faster now. He said, you know, when the British were occupying here and they were fighting the Kurds, and they were killing Kurds, we didn't know about what happened in those Kurdish villages until months later. And even now, he said, we're finding out when the British declassify files. We don't know what happened. He said, yesterday, when there's a car bombing in Erbil, I find out about it before the Ministry of Interior calls me. I find out about it either because I'm watching it on a news network, Jazeera most likely. I find out about it because somebody has called me. I find out about it because somebody's text messaged me. I get pictures from people on the street before I get pictures from the police. Mm-hmm. And so he said colonialism is impossible in the modern age because now everybody knows everything all the time. And this is in 2004, and what he was talking about were cell phones, of course. And the fact that cell phones have become ubiquitous, they're everywhere. Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, you have a cell phone. All of the different social media platforms that we're talking about, they actually wouldn't be as impactful if there wasn't a device that everybody could put in their pocket everywhere in the world and use all the time. And I think it was then that I began to realize that things were going to be different. It was impossible, I think, at least for me, I'm not creative enough to have imagined how quickly it was going to happen and how different it was going to be. But it was only a little while later that you saw pictures from Abu Ghraib that were taken on cell phones by American soldiers who were taking pictures of the people they were torturing. And the transformation became almost instantaneous.
The access of information was huge. So obviously, it's impacted the news gathering organization that you had. Take us to a story meeting. So big news breaks, and one of the examples you said, or one of the more recent examples. And how do you have that conversation with your people, either in the room or wherever they are in the bureaus the offices that they are, in order to determine how to cover this thing, given that you're being flooded with information from the mobile devices in everybody's pockets on the ground, people that are witnesses, not necessarily journalists, yet you have journalists that you want to get a sense of what's going on there, and you've got to put a product out on every screen that you exist in, right? Both mobile and online world and broadcast world.
Okay, it's a bit like chaos theory. It sounds complicated, but it all works once you have everybody in the room. We have access to 70 bureaus for the network around the world. That's for Arabic and for English. And the Arabic is a separate channel from English, so they're run editorially separately. So I'm speaking about Al Jazeera English, which is the channel that I work for. So Al Jazeera English has a giant bureau inside Doha, which is in Qatar, which is our central headquarters. But then we have bureaus everywhere. We have broadcast centers in Kuala Lumpur, in London, and in Washington, D.C. So what will happen is, let's say the bin Laden story, right? Inside Doha, the online division sits next to the news division. So there's an actual online division with online reporters who are tasked with actually pulling content in for the web.
Their priority is web.
The web, right, which is separate from TV. However, they're sitting right next to, and the lead news gatherer and the lead news director for online is sitting right next to the executive producer for news. And so whoever gets the information first or the stories coming out first, the two of them are working separately and in tandem at the same time in the same room to try to figure out what goes on. And it doesn't have to be that what goes on TV shows up online. The online section can say, you know what, I think that the most important thing we've got to put up right now is this. This is really, everybody's talking about it on Twitter. We've got to, there's so much happening on it. We're going to go with this first. TV is looking at the global context of what's showing on screen, what's showing on air, where do we have journalists, where do we have individuals. And so one may go before the other. TV may go first in one direction, online may go first in another direction, and then they'll ultimately converge.
And that's decided per story?
Yes. And it happens on a constant 24/7 running basis. And so that interaction, now one of the problems we'll also have is in a breaking story, for us, at the core of everything is journalism, right? So it's not, we don't want to simply be an aggregator of other people's content. We don't want to just take YouTube video or other people's Twitter feeds and just throw them on screen. So at the core of it, we need to have journalists confirming the story, journalists working the story. So we have those journalists basically driving then from wherever they are. They're on the phone, they're talking to us via satellite phone, via whatever communication medium they can speak with us on. And each of the bureaus calls in, and there's this very large discussion that takes place, and there's a director of news who ultimately then chooses and decides what appears on air.
You mentioned to me earlier that you do have people verify photos because you are sent doctored stuff, right?
Yes, I mean we get. I guess it's not a secret that many Arab governments aren't fans of our coverage, particularly those that are engaged in violence against their own populations right now, and so you get a wealth of information all the time on YouTube, on Twitter. People will sell you cell phone video. We have a division that actually sits nonstop working with those videos and the sources that they're coming from to ensure a minimum level of accuracy before we can actually use them, before we can put them on air. And it can be things like, well, wait a minute, this video says that it's from Homs in Syria right now, but it's raining in Homs in Syria right now, and it's not raining in this video. We have other eyewitnesses who'll say, no, I understand it, but that store that's in that picture doesn't exist right now. It's a year old. This store was there a year ago. And we'll actually try to do that with everything that we will. If you ultimately see it on air, it's actually been vetted as much as we can vet it. And it's a very laborious process. And as we get more and more information, I mean, it's the problem governments have, right, with their, governments like the United States now that collect information from all sources in order to have, like total awareness technology so that they can map everything. The problem is if you have so much information, you end up using computers to try to provide you with an assessment of how accurate something is or not. Well, we use human beings, and we use eyewitnesses, and we use people in the country where the videos are supposed to be coming from.
Contacts that you've developed.
Contacts that we've
previous
developed.
engagements.
Exactly. And there's a crowdsourcing element to part of it too, because what will happen is if something comes up that's inaccurate, now almost immediately, especially on Twitter, you'll notice, it's like an organic creature. Something will come out, a bunch of people will say, oh my God, this happened, and they'll send it out, but then somebody will pop in and say, no, it didn't happen. I'm there. I'm standing in the square right now, and this didn't happen. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of other people will say, did this happen or didn't it happen? And then a few minutes later, all of this takes 10 minutes. And there'll be thousands of tweets going back and forth, and then in 10 minutes you realize the story didn't happen.
So Twitter is a fact checker.
I mean, the crowdsourcing of individuals all pitching into Twitter ends up, in a sense, being a check and balance on the stories that are on Twitter in the first place.
So that's taking in information. What about sending out, once you've gone beyond the curation, once you've assessed and put context and done the journalistic analysis of things, how then do you put information, decide what information goes on online or broadcast?
It has to fit the editorial vision. So we don't put things up because we got them from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever. We put them up because they fit the editorial vision that we're putting out. One of the things we try very hard to do, if you're powerful, you have access to information and you have access to putting out your message. You either own your own companies or you have an ability to influence companies. News media run to you anyway. I mean, the stereotype of it is, come January, there'll be the World Economic Forum in Davos again, right? And then, the leaders and the shakers of the world will all be there, and they'll be standing in their coats on that beautiful backdrop with the mountains behind them, and there'll be reporters lined up to ask them questions. That's great. They are policymakers. They do influence events in the world, and news might come out of that, and that's appropriate. There are hundreds, thousands of people, normal people, individual people, who make history and don't have access to that. So our job is to be able to provide them with that access because they're just as important. They're not any less important. The people who are demonstrating in Maidan Tahrir in Cairo were not any less important than Hosni Mubarak, in his opinion, were. And so the challenge...
Outside the usual suspects.
Right. And the challenge is to get to them. But new media has allowed us, all this range of social media has allowed us actually easier access to them. It's allowed us to actually verify information from them much more, instead of just having, somebody saying something, there's usually video associated with it. There's usually somebody's cell phone video. There's usually other people's eyewitness accounts. And that's actually made our job of covering individuals that much easier to do. And so it fits our editorial vision. So it's not that we're not picking the cute puppy story from YouTube to run it because we think we're going to get more people to watch us on it. We are being able to say, though, however, what happened in Oakland the other day, a veteran who got shot in the head and who's in stable, I think, condition now, that's important. That's really important. His story is important. The people who are involved in that story are important. And we have to cover that story in the same way that we would cover somebody who heads Goldman Sachs who's excited to tell us about why the market's going to go up or down tomorrow.
I have to ask about what Al Jazeera decided to show with Gaddafi's death, because that was a huge controversy in terms of the types of pictures available from various sources.
Well, you can imagine it was also a matter of tremendous debate with us, obviously. Our reporter on the scene was with the rebels in Sirte. He wasn't there with them when they captured Gaddafi. But they knew Tony because he'd been with the rebels for now months, and they trusted him. And so when they captured Gaddafi alive, and then apparently he may have been tortured before he was killed, and they took those videos, they gave those videos to Tony. We were able, from their cell phones, we verified that it was in fact Gaddafi and that we believe that this was accurate information. And because of the nature of the news, we decided to run the video. Originally, we ran a little bit more graphic video than we did just a few hours later. We started pixelating because some of the video was...
Why did you run the more graphic?
Because we were running the video that we got. Because the story itself was so important that Gaddafi had been captured and killed. However, once that story was established, it was gratuitous, in our opinion, to continue showing.
Once the shock.
Right. There's no reason to keep showing that over and over and over. So we pixelated and showed much less of what that original video was.
Although now the video is out there, so people can watch it over and over for themselves.
And it was out there not just...
Is that in your mind?
It was out there not only from us, because there were other videos we didn't use. There was other video that we didn't show.
Right.
And that did make it out as well, because people, if we didn't take it, they put it on YouTube or they found other ways of getting it out there.
Does that weigh, is that a question in your mind too? If it's out there already, shouldn't we be showing it?
No, just because it's out there already doesn't mean that we jump on the bandwagon and
like you said,
it.
Just because it's on YouTube doesn't mean...
It's not. Our point is to provide information to the public that they need to know. It's not to be shocking. It's not to be gratuitous. It's not to titillate. And violence sometimes is used in that titillating way, and God knows our war correspondents cover enough of it. So, does it inform the audience? I mean, that's the question you ask at the end of the day, right? Does that video that you just showed, does it inform the audience? Or is it just a kind of, are you using it for the razzle-dazzle? And I think the informing the audience, respecting the privacy of the people that are, oftentimes in these videos to the maximum extent possible, defines or decides for us whether we do it or not.
Let's go to another piece of video that you've brought with you. Do you want to talk about what we're about to see?
Let's see it, and then I'll talk about it, because I have seen it.
We have to take all those voices, get through the clutter and try and retell that story in a way that makes sense to anyone, no matter where they're watching from.
Welcome everyone to our continuing coverage of the death now of Muammar Gaddafi. We received it just moments ago.
Welcome to Al Jazeera. It's 0800 GMT. I'm Shuri Ghosh at the top of the hour, bringing you the breaking news that Osama bin Laden has been killed.
Joining us via Skype right now from Abbottabad in Pakistan is Sohaib Akhtar, who's known to much of the world as @ReallyVirtual. Sohaib, thank you so much for joining us. So tell us, what did you hear and what did you start tweeting about?
Most of the times, helicopters do come to Abbottabad, but usually they pass by. The first thing I noticed was that it was staying in the same place.
Internet still down in Egypt.
Shireen is safe, just doesn't have internet access. I'm tweeting on her behalf.
Fighter jets flying even lower. Crowd shouting. Where is media?
In an extraordinary week in Egyptian history, this surely stands as one of the strangest sights. As the 4 p.m. curfew approaches, fighter jets and helicopters thunder over downtown Cairo, seen as an attempt to intimidate protesters to head home. It doesn't work.
Hosni Mubarak has gone. Let's go live to Cairo. Listen to that crowd. That's what they've been waiting for. Hosni Mubarak has gone.
Gee, not much has happened this year.
The joke, of course, is that, you know, I'm always perpetually behind, of course, in all the things I have to do. And the joke is, well, when there's a slow news day, I'll catch up.
Yeah.
No, I think what's remarkable there is we have a show called The Stream. It appears on 3:30 every day, Monday through Thursday, East Coast Standard Time. And that show is our petri dish for trying to incorporate and experiment with social media as part of the news, as part of our programming. It was when Bin Laden's news, when Bin Laden was killed, and we got the news on Sunday night, just before May 1st. May 1st happened to be my first day as bureau chief for Al Jazeera. So I was supposed to go in on Monday morning, and I had actually gone to bed early because I wanted a good night's rest. I hadn't met a lot of the reporters, and as you know, reporters, like lawyers, are an unforgiving lot, and I wanted to make a good first impression on them, etc. I went to bed early, and my phone dinged, and I looked at it, and there was a text message that Bin Laden dead, U.S. has body. And I thought it was a joke. You know, somebody who knew I was starting with Jazeera. Right, yeah. Somebody knows that, you know, and they're like, oh, you know, let's send him snipe hunting, you know. Then I got another ding. I went down, I checked the TV set. In fact, it was the case, put on my clothes, and drove past the streams of people going to the White House to celebrate, and went to the office and started my day. Now, the stream people realized that there was an eyewitness in Pakistan who was tweeting about the attack on Bin Laden's residence, and managed to decided that, okay, he has to be part of the story. We have to actually get him on. Our advantage was that we were in Pakistan. Our advantage is that, you know, we have reporters in most places where a lot of news agencies don't have the resources any longer to be in. So we were able to contact him before we could even get the reporter out there. We were reporting live from there. We Skyped him in and then spoke with him about what he'd actually seen. And then at one point, I think he hadn't realized, but his Twitter followers had jumped up several 100,000 from 4 or something like that. And so Derek, the host, Derek Ashang, asked him, you've got these hundreds of thousands of new followers, and they're going to know what you're going to say next. And he looked at the camera, terrified. He was just like, I have nothing. I can't be friends with them. It's not like Facebook. I don't know what to. But the interactivity now, the interactivity between individuals
who happen to be there, witnessing something,
and being able to be part of the news story. I think it's become almost second nature now. We expect it, we do it. The question becomes how to ensure that you're still providing journalism and not just eyewitness reporting. And so with the Bin Laden, for example, with the Bin Laden killing, within a day, that day, we were running stories from all the places that Al-Qaeda had victims. Because, of course, the majority of victims of Al-Qaeda happen to be Muslim and happen to be in the Middle East. But, of course, there are also the victims in the United States and in Kenya and in Tanzania. And we had reporters everywhere. And we were able to report from each of those places as to how people were responding to the death of Bin Laden. The social media tends to be an amplifier, but it also tends to be an accelerant. So we actually found we have a Twitter feed, AJE Live, and we find that we have difficulty keeping up with our viewers. So when we'll report something on air, the Twitter people, the people who are running the AJE Live Twitter account will be trying to tweet out within a minute or two what we've just seen on air first. Before they can get it out, you'll oftentimes in breaking news, you'll hear people saying AJE reporting that. So, even from a sense of using Twitter to push out our message, we're still behind everybody else who's watching, who's watching us.
Mm-hmm. It's exceptionally fast, yes. One more question for me, and then I'll throw it to you guys. How do you believe your relationship with an audience has changed now that we're living in this digital age?
Well, it's actually a lot more intimate. I think that our viewers, I'm speaking for Al Jazeera English, but I would guess maybe the same is true for CBC, BBC, France 24, and others. But our viewers seem to feel a strong sense of affinity and loyalty to us, but they also feel a need to hold us to account. So if we get something wrong, we often hear it from our viewers right away. Or if they don't like the way we did something, we actually hear from it right away. Now, normally, I guess in the past, you would have used focus groups, you would have used consultancy agencies that would have brought people in. How did you respond to this story? How did you respond to that story? It's now as if these people are all shareholders in the company who are watching the company operate in real time and commenting on it, and that it's made them, in some sense, I think it's given us a far more loyal viewership, but it's also ensured our loyalty to the editorial mission that originally attracted those viewers in the first place. If we went the commercialization route, let's say we tried to go the commercialization route right now, what do you think our viewers would do to us? How do you think our viewer base, we're in 200 million, we're in over 200 million English-speaking homes around the world. How would that viewer base respond if they saw us beginning to commercialize? And in a sense,
you're saying we don't need to commercialize in order to.
It's an amazing thing because we were just launching on November 11th. We'll be launching a new channel in Serbo-Croatian, so it'll be called AJE Balkans. AJ Balkans, Al Jazeera Balkans, and early next year we'll have Al Jazeera Turk, and we will also launch Al Jazeera Swahili. Now, I can tell you, no financial feasibility studies were done specifically to find out if we were going to make money by doing Al Jazeera Balkans or if we were going to do Al Jazeera Swahili. It was felt that these were underserved niches where audiences were interested in Al Jazeera's news coverage but didn't have access to English speaking, to the English language. and so that we needed to provide that. Well, it's fantastic that we're able to do that, but the profit motive on the news side has never been a requirement for the news. We have 16 sister sports channels, which, like, I guess, I don't know if there's an equivalent in Canada, in the United States, like ESPN, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those channels make money. Sports always makes money. Those channels make money. And we also have a C-SPAN equivalent, Al Jazeera Mubashir, which just runs live without commentary events. That's the one that the Egyptian government recently sacked and tried to shut down. And so that one, but that's like the news. That one doesn't make money. So the emphasis on the commercialization, the emphasis on the profit motive, I think, for news and for journalism, I think, is one of the critical issues of our time. If we're all going to go down that route, if news is going to have to be a commodity that makes money, then we're going to have product placement. Then you're going to have to, and product placement is not just for, you know, cans of Coke or, you know, my Kirkland water is really good on set. It's placement of causes. It's product placement of causes. It's product placement of political parties. It's product placement of political causes, and that gets really dangerous, and that becomes a slippery slope, because when you can no longer trust 15% or 20% of what you're seeing on a news channel, you're not going to trust 100% of what you're seeing on that news channel, and so it's a never-ending battle. I think it's a question for all of us in the journalism business. It's a question for all of us to figure out, you know, if this is a public trust, reporting the news is a public trust, it has to be seen that way. The public has to recognize it that way. And I think that, you know, somebody may argue, well, yeah, but you can do the news and you can make money. But
many have tried.
Yeah, and many have tried. And they're out there, and some do make money. But you can make your own assessment as to whether they provide you with better news than we do.
With that?
Very interesting. If you look at 24-hour news, let's compare Al Jazeera English to CNN, for example. And CNN has, in my opinion, become a celebrity-based. Their reporters are stars. Their coverage is kind of neutral but humanistic. And as such, it lacks the kind of, you know, visceral sense of reality that you get with Al Jazeera. However, Al Jazeera has the reporters in these areas. So consequently, you have something to back up the video cell phone, and you have something to attract the eyewitness accounts. How much of Al Jazeera's success is because of your editorial position, which you referred to?
Well, I think it's a combination. I mean, it's the editorial vision, but it's also because we have the resources to deploy. I mean, we have the resources to be in 70 bureaus around the world. We have the resources to have people, you know, when a story begins, we start with it, but we never, and here's where the editorial and the resources fall into play. The Michael Jackson trial, let's just use an example, and I'm not going to compare because I don't think it's right, I don't want to compare us to any other news agency. But let's just say you have news agency X and you have Al Jazeera English, and you have the Amanda Knox trial, or you have the Michael Jackson trial, and so News Channel X will say, I need to have a full-time crew, a full-time reporter. I'm going to have to put 2 or 3 people on this full-time. I'm going to need full-time coverage. We're going to do 6 hours a day maybe on it, etc. Okay, so resources are there. They have resources, and they're deploying them. They're making a choice on where to deploy them. When Libya started, we deployed into Libya, and we stayed in Libya. And we're still in Libya, and now we're going to open a bureau in Libya. And we're not going to leave Libya because NATO today announced that its mission has ended. We're not going to leave Libya because Gaddafi has been killed. We're now going to cover the story of Libya. We were in Tunisia. We're going to stay in Tunisia afterwards, and we're going to cover that story. The environmental stories that we're covering out of Brazil, that we're covering out of the rainforest, that we're doing in Latin America, we can do those stories because our commitment is to stay. So I think there's this question of having the resources, because if you don't have the resources, there's nothing, you can't do anything, unfortunately. But having the resources, but then being able to have the editorial vision that says, I can't actually cover this story episodically. I have to cover this story thematically.
Having a news bureau in many places, I mean, that's something the CBC had to deal with in every news agency, and it was always financial considerations. You close down a bureau in order to serve the bottom line. You could also argue that maybe the Michael Jackson trial touches on an American social problem, and an American situation where A, celebrity, B, drug abuse that is facilitated by the medical profession. So that's why they might focus on that. You would focus more on the changes in the Muslim world.
Well, no, we actually, I mean, I don't want to pretend that we didn't cover the Jackson, but the way we would cover the Jackson trial would be to cover that it started and then to cover it when it ends. It's not to cover it as an ongoing war zone in which, you know, every day there's some new exciting tidbit of news that we have to, and have, you know, eyewitness accounts, etc. I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong. There's obviously a viewership for it. There's obviously an audience for it, so that's fine. But it's a choice, right? You're making the choice, is this where I'm going to spend my resources, and is this what I want to convey to the audience? Or am I going to be doing it on a host of, you know, we've got stories out of Bangkok because of the flooding in Thailand, right? And we're going to cover the tsunami in Japan and the nuclear disaster. We covered, you know, we were covering that ongoing with reporters from Japan. I mean, again, that's another thing. We have reporters who are from the countries often that we're reporting from, not always, but often. And that gives us a sense, that gives you an on-the-ground knowledge that you don't necessarily get when you have to deploy a star correspondent to a new site, and he has a fixer, or she has a fixer waiting for them in that site, who then tells them, look, this is what you got to know, da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, we've actually got reporters who are the ones who tell us, look, this is what you really have to know about this issue, this is what you really have to know about that country.
Star correspondent, how's that for a business?
Our correspondents like the idea.
Yeah. I hear you. We've got a couple more questions. We're going to go up here first.
Can you hear me here?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of fond memories of the ex-managing director Tony Berman, who was with the CBC. When Al Jazeera got its license from the CRTC here, you know, Tony had talked about a number of commitments that Al Jazeera would make for Canada, including a bureau in Toronto. Has that happened? And if not, what's going on with your plans for Canada?
No, I mean, what Tony said is right, and we still plan on covering Canada as deeply as we intended to. We have a Toronto bureau, and we're in fact advertising for a correspondent to head that bureau, a Canadian correspondent to head that bureau. And I'm hoping actually, and Tony would be an excellent person to help us find that person. He's now based, he's teaching in Toronto.
At Ryerson?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I'm still the commitment to Canada. The commitment to Canada and reporting on Canada. Right now, we've been deploying teams from the United States into Canada to cover a lot of the stories that we've wanted to, especially our LA bureau. But we're opening a Chicago bureau as well very shortly, and they'll also be augmenting the Toronto bureau coverage.
That's relatively close.
Because it's relatively close.
Another question there was somebody in the green shirt? Yeah. Oh, okay. We'll go with the mic.
All right. You mentioned that the financial viability of the news stations is supported by other content such as sports. How does that bode for the long-term viability of the news business if it can't support itself?
Well, this is what I'm saying. I think the question is, do we expect, for example, firefighters to support themselves and have a business model in which, for example, they can charge for every house they save when it's on fire? We don't actually expect services like that to be profitable. We don't expect them to be to work on their own. So the idea that journalism, which is supposed to be, especially investigative journalism, which is supposed to be a public service that provides information that's vital to the well-being of society, the idea that they should somehow be able to cash in on their own, on their own reporting, I think is problematic. And by the way, we don't obviously just, everybody knows we also get significant contributions from the Qatari government, in the same way that BBC gets from the British government or France 24 gets from the French government. And there's a firewall, of course, to maintain editorial independence in all those countries, in all those cases. However, I think it's seductive to think that you can, and maybe somebody will come up with one. Maybe somebody will find a way that you can do, like NPR, for example, the United States National Public Radio, not only gets money from the U.S. government, but it also actually fundraises twice a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year from its viewer base, and asks them to contribute money, and then collects money from foundations as well, etc., so that they can actually continue maintaining the high-quality programming. Okay, that's one model. But those are resources that NPR has to expend on raising money in order to continue doing its work. And the airtime that they have to give up in order to do that. So I think it's an existential question for journalism. If journalism is seen as a public trust, then it's perfectly okay, perhaps, for taxpayer dollars to be used to fund, as long as there's complete editorial independence. If there's no editorial independence, it doesn't make any difference then.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Leanne Young. I'm a little bit greedy. Teresa, I'm going to ask 2 questions. They're quick, though. So the first one, you mentioned that on AJE Live, sometimes you have users that actually tweet breaking news before you even tweet it out from the account. So is there a funnel by which you guys decide where you break news? Is it still television first? Is it web first? That's the first question. And the other one is about the TV show, The Stream. From what you guys have found, what kind of what story ideas or how have you incorporated social media, and how have you found it most effective when you do it?
As far as the funneling, we don't have a set editorial policy that something has to appear on TV first or it has to appear online first. It'll depend, and because the 2 news desks, the one for online and the one for TV, are actually co-located but operating separately. One might get the jump on the other on any given moment or on any given story, but you're not talking about a long lag time. But you might see it online first, you might see it on TV first. The AJE Live is our Twitter account, so that's the information we send out. But what I was saying was that a lot of times what happens is that our viewers will be tweeting what they'll be reading on our online section or seeing on our TV set before we can actually send out our own tweet. And then on the stream, one of the things I think the stream is I think it's a great program if you haven't seen it. It starts before it goes on air. So it starts online. So people watch it, participate, talk about the show. Sometimes we've actually changed because the viewers have actually, I think, weighed in very heavily that no, today we really shouldn't talk about this. What's really important is this. This is much more important. We've got to really talk about this. And we've looked at that, and when we've agreed with that, we've actually switched topics. And so the viewers sort of help decide what appears on air. They're in conversation with the guests and with the hosts before the show goes on air. Then the show goes on air live. It's on TV for 30 minutes. And then the conversation continues online. So the show is much longer online. It could go for an hour, it could go longer. It depends on the conversation. But it's on for 30 minutes on TV. And that interaction between the online section and the TV section. And ultimately, I think what we may end up seeing, because right now on the stream we'll have a guest that we bring in either through Skype or satellite. We'll have the Twitter feed. Facebook will be on. We'll use Google Chat. There's any new mechanism that appears, we'll try our hand at using. I think ultimately what we may end up seeing is TV news that'll have your Twitter feed running underneath the screen or on the screen, your Facebook information that you've defined, that you want to be shown, happening on at the same time. And you may be watching people demonstrating in Damascus, for example, and at the same time having information shown to you, or news articles, or blogs, or reports from print media that you might want to read that are consistent with what you're watching right then and there.
It's a truly interactive model.
Right, and I think ultimately that's the direction we're heading in. Now again, advertisers will try to beat, I mean, they're already beating us to the punch in that, right? I mean, so, advertisers want to know what you're watching so that they can know what to sell you. But what if you were the one who determined what you saw? What if you were the one who determined, no, I don't want ads, what I want is my own Facebook, and I want my own Twitter feeds, and I want my own email, and I want my own, I've decided that these are the 10 sources I want blogs from, or these are the 10 sources I want news reports from, etc. You can define for yourself, just like you define on your iPad or on your tablet or on your smartphone what you want to see. You can do it on your TV screen, while at the same time still having the live TV programming taking place.
Thank you. And with that, we have to wrap. Let's thank our guests. Thank you so much.